Welcome back to Store University Lesson 8, Understanding Opportunity Value to Raise Your Wealth. I'm Chris Volk, CEO of Store Capital. In the first part of this lesson, we discussed our tendency to make business decisions based upon what we can see and what is rather than what might be. In doing so, we raised the potential for corporate opportunity costs that could spring up and bite us later. Or putting this in a glass half full manner, we have limited our ability to harvest opportunity value. Now, one reason business leaders can fall into this trap is because opportunity value is hypothetical, whereas financing terms today are known. After all, we hear maxims like, a bird in the hand is worth more than two in the bush, and so are generally conditioned to overlook a hypothetical. And perhaps part of the problem is that we have no idea how to begin to estimate the opportunity value that we're giving up. But at Store University, we do. And as with some of the earlier lessons, we'll use the V formula to help guide us. Let's begin by examining the impact on your business of limited operational flexibility. We'll start with the illustration of renting your real estate from an intractable landlord. Perhaps you have some locations that are not penciling out. Most multi-location retail and service companies encounter this issue. Let's say that 5% of your locations underperform. In our illustration, your business has an EBITDA margin. Remember this from our prior lessons, that is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciations, and rents, of 20%. But if 5% of your properties post EBITDA margins of 10%, then this would drag your overall EBITDA margin down by half a point. And that's computed by multiplying the 10% profit drag by 5% of the properties that are underperforming. I might say that this is a very mild description of the possible. It's not uncommon for underperforming assets to have absolutely no EBITDA at all, in which case the 5% of the properties might have a comparative profit drag of 20%. That would reduce your overall EBITDA margin by 1%. And if 10% of your assets underperform, that would lower your EBITDA margin by a full 2%. So, you go to your landlords to see what you might be able to do about this profit drag. There could be the potential to improve the properties in such a way as to recover the lost profitability. Or you might seek to sublease, close, or relocate the locations that cause a drag on your business. Unfortunately for you, it is not uncommon for landlords to decline your requests. They frequently view their business arrangement with you as having been struck the day you signed your lease. And perhaps they have no money to aid with improvements to your underperforming properties. Or perhaps they have borrowed money from lenders on the properties that you're renting that restricts their ability to be helpful. So, you are on your own. But your business predicament can actually get worse than this. Let's say you have 5% of your properties that actually outperform and you want to expand them. The cost for expansion will be 25% of the initial cost of the property, but the added revenues are going to be 10% per property for the expansion. Best of all, the incremental profit margin from the revenues you generate will be 40%, reflective of the high margins you can generate on your marginal revenues after all of your fixed costs are covered. So now the math works out like this. 5% of your properties with 10% sales pops and a 40% margin will raise your overall EBITDA margin from 20% to 20.2%. Just take 5%, the percent of the stores, and multiply it by 10%, the percent of the sales increase, and again by 40%, the marginal profit margin, to arrive at the 0.2%. If 10% of the stores outperform, your margin increase would be 0.4%. And if the marginal sales increase is 25% instead of 10% at each remodeled location, your margin increase would pop 1% to 21%. But to do this, you will require capital. In our illustration, the amount of improvements at the locations required equates to 25% of the initial location business investment. So you multiply the 5% of the locations by 25% and you arrive at 1.25%, which is the increase in overall corporate investment that's going to be required. If your landlords would supply funds for asset expansions, this would be ideal. Unfortunately, most landlords will take a pass at this. Again, you're on your own. Now, my illustrations are hypothetical, but they reflect a range of possibilities that are not at all far-fetched. So the question becomes, if you have constraints to limit your closure or expansion of company locations over time, how much can this impact your business value? That will be the topic of our concluding chapter in this lesson. And until then, I'm Chris Volk, thanking you for joining me on this value creation journey.